Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I am Abe with Mystic Gen Mara, a small town mystic from the middle of Idaho. And tonight we're going to discuss a topic, a gentleman in particular, in our Occult and Crochet series that is not really mystic by nature, but does have the spirit of the holiday in his bones. And as we travel along our journey tonight, hopefully you'll be entertained, or at least informed, and there might be a little bit more magic in our story than maybe at the beginning. So tonight, we are going to be talking about Santa Claus, and the legends that go over just him. We'll include some St. Nicholas a little bit later, but I wanted to go over just Santa Claus. How did we get this particular person we use today for this holiday? And where did he come from? Throughout, I will be making references to different stories and or books, some movies as well. Those are all linked in the description. Those are links that if you click through them do help support the channel, so just giving you letting you know. If you're new here, hit the subscribe button, drop a like, and comment, and if this is live, go ahead and chat in the chats, and we'll see where we go. So, tonight, I'm sure you've heard of the man in the red suit, delivering Christmas toys on Christmas Eve in a sleigh pulled by flying reindeer. 8 until later when he gets his 9th. The toys are made by his elves, and they live at the North Pole in a magical castle. But there's a lot more to this jolly old man. So let's dive into the legends and lore of Santa Claus. So the spirit of the season actually carries 3 separate names because there were actually 3 different entities that kind of over time conglomerated into what we would call Santa today. The first one is Father Christmas, we have Santa Claus, and we had St. Nicholas. Each of them have some lore that surrounds how their name came into being. And I'll talk about those guys later, but we're focusing on just the Santa version tonight. So we're heading off to the North Pole to sit in the warm, magical castle, so have your hot cocoa ready while we begin our story. The basic description of Santa over the years is a portly older man, very jolly, with a white beard, something along the lines of this guy right here. He's adorned with red coat and pants with white fur accents, collars, and cuffs. He wears a black belt and shiny black boots. And during this time of the year, he's going to have a great big bag of toys with him pretty much at all times, because you never know when you're going to run into a child. His belly jiggles like a bowl of jelly when he laughs, deep and echoey with the ho ho ho. So that's what we know of him today. I got something there. In the Dutch, Belgium, and Swiss lore, the man is actually called Santa Claus, and his legends compete with St. Nicholas as far as how or what influenced the most. But Santa Claus is where we get the name Santa Claus. Santa Claus is considered the Christmas man or Father Christmas, and in these countries, gift giving is split between December 6th, which is, I can't quite place that date, or as to why they use it, and December 25th, the more common Christian Christmas. The interesting part is the name Santa Claus is actually a mistranslation of Sinterklaas. So that's where we end up with his name. It's not the name of a specific person, it's a mistranslation of an old legend. Still works, we still have our guy. So and so where do we get a lot of our concepts of the old Santa Claus? Let's look way back, and I mean way back. We're going back to some ancient pagan traditions that the ancient Celts and Nordic people would follow. And when we go back this far, we bump into our old god friend, Odin. Well, Odin has another name, and that's where we focus on Christmas and Santa Claus. Odin's other name is Woden. And he also, with the name Woden, carries the name of Yule figure or the long bearded, for a good reason. Woden rides a gray stallion, a similar to Sleipnir but not the same, and he would be wearing a blue hooded cloak. The only picture I could find similar to that would be this one here, and it's from an old 1902-ish greeting card. There are still some images out there, but not many. Most of it's just descriptions that you can find in stories and legends. So he would ride his stallion on the winter winds on the eve of Yule, which would be December 21st. So he'd leave the night of the 20th. Woden, or Odin, it is believed would become Santa Claus over the years. There's a lot of lore saying this is where we kind of get our root for what we see today. And he rides out on that night to deliver gifts to those in the lands. It's kind of interesting because that's what Santa does, and he's the only one that would travel the distance. Woden was known to travel the entire length of the countries that he was in charge of in a single night. Sounds more like Santa today, but so there's actually a fun little fact I ran across when I was researching the Woden story that I'm so glad that we went the right direction we did. There was a belief in Northern Europe back in the day of a Yule goat. Yes, goat. A goat that delivers gifts to people. I'm sure glad that we went with Woden Santa Claus and not the goat version, personally. So, one of America's first times of using the name Santa Claus was around 1773 in some United States publications. Later, though, Washington Irving made a small book including Santa Claus art, and it is here where the more churchy bishop costume from St. Nicholas, because that's what originally came to the States, faded out. Irving made Santa a portly-bellied Dutch-style sailor. He would have a pipe and a green winter coat. Irving wrote the book and art as part of a parody, kind of making fun of some of the culture in New York. I don't really agree with his purpose, but this is the type of Santa that he was describing, because the more Dutch version of Santa Claus would show up in green with the white fur. The white fur's been kind of standard throughout all of the stories, but the robe color itself changes. So this is the Dutch version that Washington Irving would kind of talk about in his stories and write about. So, where am I at? Sorry. Oddly enough, the reason that Irving wrote the book and focused on Christmas so specifically was to attempt to tone down the more bawdy and salacious parts of Christmas at that time. Wassailing, drinking spiked mead, or I just completely lost the word, mulled cider, things like that, was very common. But when we say cider in that time, it wasn't apple juice, it was hard cider. And so you had the wassailing, you had public, let's call it overactive PDA, as well as premarital relations, which was scandalous at the time. And they were so common in the bigger cities, and it was all part of this Yule Christmas celebration. Yule and Christmas, pre most of what we think of today as Christmas, was another celebratory season, because in the old times this was the time when light would return to the world, so this was a huge celebration. Not quite as amorous as like Beltane, but Yule was exceptionally let's get lit type thing. Not really focused on the heart of the season is where Irving was like, we need to shift this perspective, because what's going on ain't good in his mind. So he tried to change it to something completely different in his work. Oddly enough, his influence did change a lot of people's perception of Christmas. And so later, after his book was written, there was another written in 1821, and I put this one in the description, and it's called Old Santa Claus with Much Delight, and it was a poem that Santa Claus rides in a reindeer-pulled sleigh giving gifts to children. This poem is thought to be the inspiration to the classic, now what I would call canon version of Santa Claus that we have, that shows up in the later poem, The Night Before Christmas. In this poem, Santa is described as being a short, chubby elf. His sleigh was described as a miniature sleigh pulled by 8 tiny reindeer. This poem is also where we learn the reindeers' names. And I have to go over them because there was a oops in translation that shocked me, first of all, but also made me want to go back to the original version. So, of course, we have Dasher and Dancer, and Prancer and Vixen, Comet and Cupid, but this is where they lost the plot. What we would call Donner and Blitzen were originally named Dunder and Bliksem. These were the Dutch words for thunder and lightning. I'm sorry, let's go back to Dunder and Bliksem. Thunder and lightning pulling Santa's sleigh sounds way cooler than Donner, because all I think of that was the Donner Party. Not a good one. And Blitzen sounds like a French dessert. But Dunder and Bliksem, especially with the term of lightning and thunder as their meaning, let's go back to that. Those were just, to me, way cooler names. But where we get a lot of our modern lore was The Night Before Christmas. And that was where, you know, with I in my Ma in her kerchief and I in my cap had just settled down for a long winter's nap. That's the poem. I had that thing memorized at one point. That we're talking about, that actually helped us solidify what we see as Santa today. And oddly enough, it was that poem, The Night Before Christmas, that led to another one of Santa's names, which is Kris Kringle. And I could not find an active source for Kris Kringle, except that it was the common name used for this person in the Pennsylvania Dutch-style community, and the name has added into the collection and kind of stuck to this day. So we've got Father Christmas, St. Nicholas, Santa Claus, and now we have Kris Kringle. But Kris Kringle, like I said, kind of ties into the Santa Claus in this country, so that's where we'll leave him. As time goes by, Santa grew taller and a bit chubbier, and eventually in 1866 or thereabouts, a new variation of Santa was developed, and that was when we took him from the Norse countries and stuck him at the North Pole, which kind of makes sense when you look at some of the what his traveling was. Like, it makes more sense to travel from the north and go around versus starting at one side and having to circle up and then circle back down, if you believe lore, which I personally find fun, so we're going there. And it was shortly after this that Santa Claus was able to be adding a partner, Mrs. Claus. And Mrs. Claus was added by the poet Catherine Lee Bates in her poem Goody Santa Claus on a Sleigh Ride, which just sounds like a fun little poem. I can't remember. Let me double check. I did not get that one added to the list, so, but I think it's a free use, so you can just look that one up, because it is out there. Where am I at? Should not move things. Later in 1897, an editorial in the New York Sun, actually, which is interesting, asked the question, is there a Santa Claus? And this editorial, because I've read the entire thing and you can still find it, this guy was debating whether Santa Claus was real or not, and what would you tell a child, because they were writing into the paper as well as, writing letters to Santa. And this particular editor was like, we've got to do something. So he wrote this whole thing out, and he actually put a phrase in there because this one girl in particular, according to the story, had written into him a couple times, and his reply eventually came out was, "Yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus." And eventually this would be made into a movie adaptation later on. I did link that in the description. There's a couple of different versions. The one that I linked is the first version of it that was made. There's an animated version, but I was looking at clips of that on YouTube. There are good movies, there's bad movies, and then there's, why did you do that? This was a, why did you do that to me? But the live action one was really good. I've only watched it a couple times because I literally just learned about it like 2 years ago. And it's just, I don't know, it's got a nice Christmassy feel to it. Makes, warms your heart. So, Santa was not yet an immortal being, which is interesting considering originally we're talking Woden, which was a god. So, how he wasn't classified as an immortal yet is a little bit strange to me, but what do you do, right? So, and I'm currently drinking, and this is not sponsored, just something I'm telling you about, the Synergy kombucha, but this one is the, if I get my light to not blind it, Sacred Life one, and it tastes, it's kind of got like algae and stuff in it, but the easiest way to describe is it tastes like sitting on a beach. It's just a really relaxing flavor, but I digress. Back to Santa Claus. Santa Claus becoming an immortal being showed up in around the early 1900s. One of Santa's first mainstream, quote-unquote, jobs was a spokesman. Okay? For a mineral water company in 1915. These were black and white ads, and there wasn't really anything super special. I did try to find some images. I couldn't find anything really provable to that time. It was more of, we think. I'm sure there's some better stuff out there. You come a point when you're tired of digging. So that's where we're at with that one. But in the 1930s, he became a spokesman for the Coca-Cola beverage company. Around Christmas time, Santa Claus shows up, and there's a very iconic image that we see today was very minorly adjusted from what was originally produced back in the 1930s. And this led to some of the most iconic art of jolly old Saint Nick. Pepsi followed in the Christmas grifting, because that's how I feel that went, in the 1940s and 50s, and this was the time when the more colored images of Santa went to the red and white clothing that we see today. Coca-Cola's colors have always been red, white, with a little bit of accent of black, so changing the iconic green or blue Santa into the red made sense for Coca-Cola at the time. Pepsi just was like, we're sticking with that. So, and originally it was said that Santa made all the toys by himself, and later, once his wife was involved in the toy making, she would help with him. And over time, the jolly old Santa Claus had a crew of magical elves hand-making all of the toys. I could not find an exact time frame, and I looked, I tried, just couldn't find the exact point when adding the magical elves into the story occurred, because it was sometime after the night before Christmas and today. So there's a 150-year window of time there, give or take, that the elves showed up, which is a good thing. It's just not sure where exactly they popped in. So Santa plays and stories have flooded media over the years. Written media, audio media, visual media, stores, all of it. There are many, many, many movies about Santa Claus and his elves, and I've linked several in the description below. My all-time favorite, and I just have to say this, is, oh come on, I should have dug it out. Okay, anyway, it is this collection, the original Christmas classics. This one right here is the story of Santa Claus. Santa Claus is Coming to Town is what it's called. And it's the claymation by Rankin and Bass. And most of the videos on here are Rankin and Bass productions. To me, you're not going to find a better story because they got really iconic voices. Burl Ives is one of the voices. There was Fred Astaire, I believe, was the other one. But there's several really amazing voices in that. And it's just, it personifies Santa, and it just kind of shows you what the meaning of the holiday is. And then there's like Rudolph and all the rest of them. There's still that claymation, stop motion type art. If you haven't seen them, get them. If you have, watch them again. This is the time to watch them. It's just a way to kind of bring back the nostalgia of when you were a kid. They're amazing shows to watch. Anywho, sorry. One of the more interesting tidbits that I ran across was a 1938 radio play by Norman Corwin. And I can honestly say I'd never heard of this until I was digging through this for this episode. And in this play, the play is called The Plot to Overthrow Christmas. In this play, the demon Mephistopheles and various historical damned figures plotted to overthrow Christmas and destroy it. And they eventually decided on Emperor Nero to be their assassin, to, take care of Santa. And I was like, are you kidding me? This was actually a thing? It is. You can check it out below. I was floored by this. The funny part is, as I was going through it, Santa uses his wits and the magic of the heart of Christmas to actually flip Nero from being his assassin to being his helper. And I was like, I wish I could have heard that in 1938, because those old crystal tube radios were so scratchy anyway. But to hear that being spoken, because the drama of hearing voices where you can see the images in your head is so much, to me, more powerful. Watching a movie's great, but when you hear the play being acted and all you have is your ears, it hits differently. That's all I can say. So I'm gonna have to look up if they even have a recording from the time or something that's been recreated from that. But that was kind of a fun little side journey I found. So let's look at some of the other lore of Santa. The chimney thing goes way back again, further than you would have thought, because this is a Woden thing. Has nothing to do with any of the other people associated with Santa. This is Woden. He would drop into the house to leave gifts through the fire holes or the chimneys, depending on if it was a rock structure or a thatched roof. But that was the ancients that did that. Nothing new. Leaving an offering for Santa was very common, still is today. Less so, but I think we should go back to that. In the North American area, we generally leave out cookies and milk. You bake them the day, Christmas Eve, and you leave them out for Santa, because Santa has to keep that bowl full of jelly jiggling. If you don't keep the sugar and dairy going, you're not going to get there. But in Britain and Australia, which I thought it was an odd combination, but they are both, one was a British viceroyalty. You leave out beer and, or depending on where you're at, sherry, and that is left beside mince pies. I had to look up mince pies because what I think is gross, but what they really are is small pies that are filled with mixed fruits, candied fruits, etc., spices, and then that is blended with suet and baked into a pie shell. Fatty little treat. Not sure if it's any better than the image I had in my head, but that's what they would leave out. I just find it kind of entertaining that they leave liquor out for Santa. Canada, interesting, has a postal code for the North Pole, if I can talk. And it's for the North Pole residents, for the Claus family, and all of their workers. This code, and when I looked this up, I had to double check, it actually exists, is H0, H, then 0H0. this zip code is literally ho ho ho. And I thought that was adorably cute. But just something very Canadian about that. Just, and I'm not being rude or anything else. It just, that's so something that I could see happening up there. In Alaska, there is a town called the North Pole, and it's in this town that they actually have a full Santa Claus house or residence. The town itself, and if you look it up, it's pretty cool. It's literally like Christmas year round. That's what they do. That's their theme. That's their thing. It's very Christmassy. The U.S. Post Office has even made a North Pole zip code. And for anyone who's interested, the zip code is 99705. Why they picked that number, not something closer to Canada's ho ho ho, I'm not sure, but that's where they went. Almost all of the Nordic European countries have a town that is the home of Santa for that area. Santa's got a lot of property. We'll just go there. Because when you look at those countries, there's like 6 or 7 of them that I found that have their own home for Santa, and not just the North Pole that we see. Like, they have their own little sub-residence for him. And Santa makes his appearance with his wife in many parades and shopping malls worldwide. There's actually a school, and I did not know this until I was looking it up, that was started in the 30s. I didn't put the date in here, but it was 30s, 40s, somewhere in there, that is specifically to train Santas for malls and things like that. It's like a Santa University. And it gives you the things to say, how to act, how to respond to situations, but it's mainly to help you get into the spirit of the person you're portraying. And I'm sorry, but I think that is the coolest thing ever. How many people still do it today? The Santa, quote-unquote, University is still open, still functioning. I just don't know if you have to go to it to be like a mall Santa, or, because most of it's online now anyway, but it's kind of a cool concept. Sorry, got distracted there. They show up to help with charity work during the holiday season. The Santa Minions. And Santa is all over various media, usually between the time of December 1st and the 25th. And how does this jolly elf find out what the kiddos want? Well, in most areas, you can write letters to Santa, as I described above. In some countries, there are people, and I questioned if this ever happened, but there are countries, a lot of European countries, they will bring in extra staff to the post office to help answer the questions and letters that are written to Santa by children. That's so cool to me. But if not writing letters, he can always use his magical crystal snowball, a trick that he learned from his friend the Winter Warlock. And if you've seen the films, you'll know what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, you should go look those up. Nowadays, you can track Santa's sleigh on various websites. And the one that I first came across this, and I actually used to do this every year, yes, I'm a grown-up child, I don't care, is the NORAD Tracks Santa website, or Google Santa Tracker. Those are the two most common. There's even one that the Weather Channel does. I personally wouldn't look at that one just because the Weather Channel's not one of my favorite places. But the NORAD one is pretty cool, and right now they have a countdown clock on the website to clicking down to liftoff for Santa. I put links to the Google and the NORAD ones down below. Me personally, I'm still Team NORAD. I also found out that I didn't realize this, NASA has a Santa tracker as well, so you can track Santa from space. But yeah, I'm still on the NORAD one, just because it was the first one, and they have kept it pretty they've upkept it really well. There we go. So if you're interested, especially if you've got youngins, the under 13 crowd, put it up on the screen and just kind of watch it, or like minimize it in the corner of your screen over here or something like that, and just kind of keep an eye on where Santa's at. Like, oh, he's almost to our house. You better get to bed, all that fun stuff. But it's, like I said, they're just fun. Anyway, there are the bah humbugs out there. I hate to say it, I can be one of them. I try not to, because Santa and Yule is kind of a time to put away petty grievances and frustrations. Get into the heart of the season. But there are the bah humbugs. There are, and it's weird because I was raised in a very strict Christian household, and this never was a thing for me. There are Christian groups out there that claim that Santa is being worshipped, therefore not a good guy. I never had that impression growing up. And like I said, I was raised in a very strict Christian household. There are others who are okay and supportive of the meaning of Santa. Not the person, but the meaning of Santa. And I was like, what? Either you like it or you don't. What are you doing? The naysayers can include those who don't think it's a good idea to lie to children about a mythological person. But these same people will let them watch Disney and think that magic is, like, that kind of magic is okay. Pick your battles, guys. Does Santa exist or not? I'd rather have them believing in Santa than Jafar, personally. What is also interesting, as I was rooting around sorting things out for this, the more atheistic and communistic the country was, the less likely they were to support the legend and lore of Santa, to the point of making it illegal altogether. On that, I was looking into a little bit of, when I found that, I kind of wanted to see what Russia did. There was a very long period of time where you could celebrate Christmas, but not Santa, not St. Nicholas. It was the ruling class was your Santa. And to even celebrate in another way could end up with some very unpleasant results. But what's fascinating to me is the more spiritual and religious, or more Plato version republic a country was, the more the concept of Santa, Yule, and Christmas were celebrated and promoted. Something to think about. I did not realize that there was that big of a split. I kind of thought Christmas was fairly universal to anyone who, in the more Christianized countries, but that part kind of was an eye-opener to me, that there were actually parts of the world that celebrated Christmas, and for a very broad period of time, like 70 years, they didn't. Not in the way we would see it today. So yeah, that was a little bit of a shocker. And there are still people out there that want to ban Santa because of the commercialization of the Christmas holiday. But why are you demonizing the man who preaches charity? Giving to others with no thought of receiving anything in return. This man is the heart and face of charity. The commercialism has nothing to do with Santa. Nothing. The commercialism is on us. Because how many people do you know that will literally max a credit card out because they have to make sure everyone has some new thing, instead of making something, baking bread, cookies? I can't tell you how many times. That's what I do. I love making stuff, so I bake and things like that for Christmas. And you're giving them something functional, but something that they're actually going to use. And that means a lot to people. You put your energy into it, your time, which means, in my opinion, is more valuable than some coins rattling in your pocket. Just because they're getting the new thing, that doesn't mean they're going to appreciate it. But knowing that it took you 35 hours to knit or crochet a scarf or a shawl, especially the detailed ones, that means a lot. That's invaluable. There's no price tag you can put on that. As far as like handmade as a gift for people, there are things like that that are so much more important. Spending time with people. That's what Santa is. Santa is the perfect example of giving just because. I mean, there's the story of, he gives coal to the bad kids, but it's still they're getting something. Maybe not what they want, but they still got something. And Santa is the polar opposite of Krampus, who beats kids with the root. Don't get me wrong, I think Krampus is awesome. But with Santa, even if you've been less than good, you still get something. Santa is the magic of our modern day Christmas and Yule. Without the magic, what is the point of Yule and Christmas? There isn't. Without Odin or Woden, we wouldn't have the man today we know as Santa. It's just not how it would work. Going back so many years, you actually find that the pagan roots or the Celtic roots to the modern person. The ancient gods are constantly being reborn in new and exciting ways, but we've forgotten our history. We've forgotten the past. So, when you're around your family this year, think about the people who have passed. Think about the people that you may have forgotten and the wisdom that they had. And if you have people alive today, sit down and have a conversation with them. You'll be surprised the ancient wisdom that they may spout forth. Christmas and Santa Claus are way more than the commercialization and the gift giving. It's about family. It's about connection. It's about linking back to your past. So as you go forward in this Christmas and Yule season, be safe out there, especially if you're traveling. The roads are ridiculously slick, icy. There's a lot of people out there. If you're traveling and flying, understand we're all humans. A simple smile sometimes is a lot for somebody. Remember, Santa is about giving without anything expected in return. Simple smiles, excuse me, didn't mean mean to bump into you, things like that. And you're still gonna have the grumps. That's life. But if you put yourself in that season of Christmas, maybe you can spread it throughout the year as well. Really tap into that as being more of a kind person, just in general. It's not easy. There's days you want to jump up and down and scream and shout and whatever else you would want to do. But remember that the ancient gods are always watching, and sometimes in ways you didn't expect. Because you never know, Santa might be still watching you from his magical snowball. So with that, I will let you guys go. If you're new here, hit the subscribe button, drop a like on the video, comment, let me know what your thoughts are, and I will see you in the next video. There is maybe some program adjustments coming up next week because Monday the 25th is Christmas, so I'm not sure if I'll be live or not, but I'll keep you posted. Have a great rest of this week. Drive safe, fly safe, and be safe, and have a very happy Christmas and happy blessed Yule.